Good evening. This is Orlando Q. Johnson, or Mr. O for all those with a music instructor for all learners. What I'm going to do right now is something I kept saying I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it live and do something I haven't done in ages. Play music. And what I wanted you guys to see, the light may be getting your way, but what I want you guys to see is what I love to do. I've been playing piano since the age of 10, and I'm like 53 now. Hopefully live to see 54, 55, and so on. But the first song that I learned, I try to tell my kids that I teach that the first song that I learned was back over 43 years ago. And it was taught to me by Miss Darlene Mumbauer. And those are my friends on Facebook who may be seeing this. They will remember. Those were the recitals we used to have. And the first song was actually called "O Come Little Children," and it was a regular finger song, but it was something simple. And remember, I learned that song at the age of 10. I'm 53 now, and I retained that information. And that was one thing about music that I wanted people to realize, that music is important, because I still remember some of the songs that I did 43 years ago, and now I'm 53. So maybe a little rough at times, but I retained that information. And I remember as I got to high school, I got into the trumpet, which helped me out. And I remember playing Bach's Fur-Elise. Sorry, that is actually Beethoven's Fur-Elise. And this was Fur-Elise. And that was just the beginning excerpt of the song, and I actually loved that song. I used to practice and practice and practice until I got it right. And I remember Dr. Turner, who was Miss Wilson way back when in high school, but she got her doctorate later on in life, and she was still like a mother to me. And we actually did a two-piano piece from me and a friend of mine, Elliot Johnson, in high school. We did a concert, and we did a two-duet piano piece. I played the primo, which was the beginning part, and he had another part, and he was playing along with me. And I remember her saying that no one else has ever actually done the two-piano part to Fur-Elise by Beethoven. But guess what? She found it, and we did, and we had a ball. And then I remember when I first got to high school, and I said this on Facebook with some friends of mine, I showed her the music that I actually learned how to play. It was a piece, I remember, it was Bach's Minuet in G. I'll try that again. See what happens? You forget as you get older. Again, that is that retention of music as you learn that, hey, they're taking music out of the schools, which we know. We got to work on that, and that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to teach the remembrance, the love of music. And as I got older, as we do, I would pick up music and just try to learn as much as I can. Even playing the trumpet, I continue to play. Pick up some trumpet pieces, pick up music. I just ordered some trumpet music now to get back into playing a trumpet. But then, we start playing in church, and you remember some of the songs you used to be sing. And one song I learned years later, that it was called "Praise Is What I Do." That was a simple song I learned years ago when I actually moved here to Baltimore, but it was a beautiful piece. And it brings me back to the times where I used to work all day, go to school all day, and practice at night. When you're in school for music, you have to work. And I try to instill that into the kids. You have to work. You have to continue to work. You have to work all the time. You got to practice. Learn those scales. One octave, two octaves. Your major scales, your minor scales. As some technical people would say, that's the back office work, so you would understand what's going on when you're playing a piece. And then as I was in the Mennonite Church, I remember I played at my home church in Philadelphia for like 20 years, almost before I moved here to Baltimore. And there was a back and forth from the young people's type of music to the older type of music. And I was in that mix at that time, because I guess God was working on me. Yeah, I was in the Kirk Franklin and playing all that music that we like by Kirk. And then we got to remember that we have to play the hymns. So, people love to hear the hymns as well. So, sometimes we would have a weekly, I remember doing something called the History of the Hymns. And one hymn, and I played it earlier and I almost cried, but one hymn that is not a hymn, but is a Negro spiritual. And one hymn that the Lord brought to me at that time, I think I was like in my 20s back then, but he brought this hymn to me, or this Negro spiritual, by Thomas A. Dorsey, and it's called Precious Lord, Take My Hand. And I'm going to read you the history of that. You know, there's a lot to it, but it gives us an understanding of what music was. And when I get finished reading the history to it, then you'll understand. When we play music, we just don't want to play with playing the notes that we see before us, but when we play music, we want to play with understanding of what was going on in the composer's mind, what was going on in Bach's mind, what was going on in Mozart's mind, what was going on in Debussy's mind, or, you know, whomever the composer is. When we practice and when we want to instill in our children that you just don't want to play notes, you want to instill understanding. History of the hymns. Precious Lord, Take My Hand. Many hymns were conceived in the throes of tragedy. Precious Lord was written in Chicago in 1932 following the death of Thomas Dorsey's wife, Nettie, an infant son during childbirth. Dorsey, from 1899 to 1993, was born in Chicago. In Georgia, his father was a Baptist preacher and his mother was a piano teacher, known as the father of black gospel music. Dorsey combined African-American church hymns such as those by Methodist minister Charlie A. Tinley with blues and jazz. This worldly combination was not without controversy at first, but set the tone for gospel music for decades to come. Born to Villa Rice, Georgia, Dorsey was reared in Atlanta from the age of 5, where he came in contact with the musical sounds of the blues. He moved to Chicago in 1915 and studied at the Chicago College of Composition and arranging, and began playing the nightclubs under a variety of names as a young man, including Georgia Tom, Texas Tommy, and Barrel House Tom. Dorsey started to play rent parties, house parties in which tenants would hire a musician or band to play for the party and pass a hat to raise money to pay their rent. Well, which is, you know, we need to do that today. The rent party played a major role in the development of jazz and blues music. See, that's something I just learned. A rent party. You pass that hat around. I'm playing. We're going to make some money, pay the rent. Dorsey put together the Wildcats Jazz Band to play for Ma Rainey in 1925. His wife, Nettie, was Rainey's wardrobe mistress. After suffering a severe illness in 1926, Dorsey was converted in 1928 and became active in Pilgrim Baptist Church in Chicago, meaning he came to the Lord. Beginning in 1932, he served as the church's choir director for 40 years. Of this 1,000 musical of gospel choirs and choruses, serving as the organization's president. Black musicians during the pre-civil rights era often formed their own publishing companies in order to make their music available. He began the Tommy A. Dorsey Gospel Song Music Publishing Company, a publisher of inexpensive gospel blues music. Even though he had hundreds of jazz and blues songs to his credit, he turned the gospel music, one of the first to use the term. So he basically turned the gospel music word. Following the tragic death of Nettie and their infant son in 1932, Dorsey provides an account of the circumstances surrounding the composition of this famous song. Back in 1932, I was 32 years old and a fairly new husband. My wife, Nettie, and I was living in a little apartment in Chicago's South Side. One hot August afternoon, I had to go to St. Louis, where I was to be the featured soloist at a large revival meeting. I didn't want to go. Nettie was in the last month of pregnancy with our last child, but a lot of people were expecting me in St. Louis. In the streaming St. Louis heat, the crowd called me to sing again and again. When I finally sat down, a message boy ran up with a Western Union telegram. I ripped open the envelope, pasted it on the yellow sheet were the words, "Your wife just died." When I got back, I learned that Nettie had given birth to a boy. I swung between grief and joy. Yet that night the baby died. I buried Nettie and our little boy together in the same casket. Then I fell apart. For days I closeted myself. I felt that God had done me an injustice. I didn't want to serve him anymore. Or with gospel songs. I just want to go back to the jazz world I once knew so well. But still I was lost in grief. Everyone was kind to me, especially a friend, Professor Fry, who seemed to know what I needed. On the following Saturday evening, he took me up to Mellon's Porgo College, a neighborhood music school. It was quiet. The late evening sun crept through the curtains window. I sat down at the piano, and my hands began to browse over the keys. Dorsey remembered an own pentatonic or five-note melody from the Sunday school days. Matlin, the United Methodist Hymnal, number 424 by George Allen, 1812 to 1877, paired with the text, "Must Jesus bear the cross alone," arranging this tune and adding his own words, "Precious Lord," became the most famous of his many gospel songs. He gave the song to Fry, who introduced it to the choir in Atlanta Ebenezer's Baptist Church the next Sunday, an event that day. Dorsey later remarked, tone up the church. Martin Luther King Sr. was the pastor at Ebenezer at this time, beginning his ministry there in 1931. The three stanzas capture the grief not only of Dorsey, but of any who have suffered significant loss. The incipit of opening line in stanzas 1, "Precious Lord, take my hand," indicates a suffering soul that is reaching out. The singer acknowledged that they are at the end of their rope. "I'm tired, I'm weak, I'm warm." Perhaps Dorsey was referring to Matthew 28, 23 to 27. The narratives where Christ stills the storm when he penned, "Through the storm, through the night, lead me on through the night." Stanzas 2 drives upon the imagery of journey of one which the way grows weak. The traveler cries out and once again reaches for the hand of Christ. The third stanza begins, "When the darkness appears," reminiscent of Psalms 23:4, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." By the time you reach the third stanza, the terrain was challenged from a stormy sea. Stanza 1, "A long road," stanza 2, "To a river of hope," stanza 3. Upon singing, "At the river I stand," the singer reaches at last the final destination, the symbolic Jordan River. Each stanza concludes effectively with the refrain, "Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home," perhaps in an image of the Good Shepherd in the Gospel of John. "Precious Lord" has been received by many famous singers, including Elvis Presley, Hilda Jackson, Roy Rogers, and Tennessee Ernie Ford. Martin Luther King Jr. drew inspiration from this. His favorite song, it was sung at the rally in Memphis the night before the civil rights leader assassination. President Lyndon B. Johnson requested that "Precious Lord" be sung at the funeral. Dorsey was the first American elected to the Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame and the Gospel Music Association Living Hall of Fame. Fisk University houses his archives as well as those noted musicians W.C. Hardy and George Gershwin. And with that, I'm just going to play, actually. This was one of my favorite ones, and it actually gave us a history because the song was actually brought out through grief and sorrow of losing his wife and child the same night. A lot of people didn't know that. God just brought this to me earlier today. I was actually, I don't know if I'll be able to make it through it, but I just want you to enjoy it. I haven't played it in years. I just picked it up and just wanted to have some fun with it. And that is what I just wanted to do this evening, because I was just bringing back the times when I would just practice all night, work all day, practice all night, work all day. And that's what I'm getting back into, and that's what I want to actually instill into the younger generations, which I call them our future musicians of America. Whatever instrument, whatever you do, you just give it to God, and He will do the rest. And all those who have been listening, I hope you enjoyed it. But that's it for tonight. Thank you.